continues. Is it possible that he targeted charities in his $50 billion scheme? Well, Gary Tobin is the president of the Institute for Jewish and Community Research. They study American philanthropic ventures. He joins us now from San Francisco. I think the first thing, and the scope of this obviously is really amazing, but one element that seems to have really captured the public's imagination is the charities that are involved. Is there something special about the makeup of charities that make them especially vulnerable to these type of scams?
Well, there were many of them involved in social and political networks that were involved with Mr. Madoff, and they took it at face value that their investments would be safe. They, in this period, stopped making the safest investments that they might have, which they would have done in the 50s, 60s, and before this latest bull market. So they began to take riskier investments, watching the big returns at Harvard and places like that. So they were easier victims in that regard.
Gary, Jewish charities were especially hit hard by this scandal. Why were they so trusting of Bernie Madoff?
Look, he was at the center of the Jewish philanthropic world through the Palm Beach Country Club, through the boards that he sat on, like at Yeshiva University and elsewhere. And many of his friends were hedge fund and other kinds of investors who themselves are involved in Jewish philanthropy. So Jewish philanthropy is going to be disproportionately hurt by this scandal. But the real story is that this is the biggest scandal in American philanthropic history. What will unravel is that hospitals, universities, institutions that serve the poor, they're the ones that are going to be hurt, and for all Americans, it's not just Jewish philanthropies that were hurt.
Right, I get that much, but the Jewish community is known for its philanthropic endeavors. Will this have some sort of long-term impact on their giving?
I think in the short term, the monies that have been lost will hurt specific Jewish organizations. But there are thousands of Jewish organizations. The vast majority of them will not be touched by this scandal. What's really hurt Jewish philanthropies is what's hurt other philanthropies as well, which is the meltdown in the financial and housing markets, where nonprofits of all kinds have seen their endowments decline by 20, 30, and 40%. That's where the real hurt has come.
Gary, I want to ask you about this scandal. Do you believe that Bernie Madoff could be the sole mastermind and pull this thing off all by himself?
I don't think that as this scandal unravels that it's possible, given the length of time, the scope, the number of people involved, that one human being could cheat that many people over that long a time without any help from anybody. This is a guy who was stealing from the rich and giving it to nobody for a very long time. Other people have to have been involved.
Do you think that this scandal goes beyond the element of greed and says or speaks to something deeper, more sinister about Bernie Madoff?
Well, I think the only way to describe his behavior is that somehow he got into this and there was no way to get out. Another way to describe it is he is just delusional, and he kept believing that somehow he was going to work his way through it. The other is that there is no way to explain evil behavior. That is, this is a man who has cheated nonprofits, his friends and family. You cannot get more corrupt than closing down institutions that are providing bone marrow transplants. He's either delusional or corrupt to his core, and we don't know exactly which.
How long do you think, even after the economy rebounds, that we'll see charities rebound, that we'll see the American public feel more free about donating money? Because it's not just this scandal, but we've seen all kinds of scandals in the past where people have given their money and maybe 10% or even less actually goes to the actual charity that people thought they were donating to.
Donors don't need any more excuses not to give than a declining economy and a deep recession. This is going to hurt in the short term. People will be more cautious about whether or not their monies are being used properly and where there are endowments that it's being invested well. In the long term, I think it will remind everybody that fiduciary controls in place should be followed to the letter of the law and beyond. People should be as careful as possible in the institutions that are serving donors. But I think it's going to be some short-term hit on this.
Okay.